And I have to quit measuring God to move in my life, to speak to me the way that I hear my wife or my children or my friends or my church folks speak to me. But when you learn to get into a silent place and just sit until you're moved by the presence of God, then you learn to become very sensitive at how God works. Sometimes we need to learn to tarry in quiet places so that we can learn to empty out every distraction. Sometimes you don't realize that your thoughts and your expectations and your routines and your plans, they don't run as, you don't realize they run rampant the way they do until everything else is silent around you and you have to begin to see it and hear it. Just empty it out, empty out. Right now, just empty out. Lord, I want to be prepared, not just for your move, but God, I want to be prepared for a move. A move of God. What you worried about that meeting for tomorrow? No reason to be concerned right now about that bill coming due Thursday. Won't you just ask him, Lord, help me to be sensitive to your presence. Help me to learn to sit in the silence of your presence. I'm going to tell you, see, sitting in silence long enough, it's okay for when you do it for 30 seconds, but all of a sudden you give it a minute, it starts feeling really uncomfortable. The truth is that we wrestle and grow uncomfortable in silence because it begins to put every chaotic devil that's running around in our mind on notice. That while you've had me deceived and distracted, now I can begin to sense and see everything that's keeping me from hearing God. I'm just telling you what I have to do. I come in here a lot of Sunday. I'm just being honest with you. That's why I'm telling you, I'm bringing you into a place that I function in. I come in here a lot of Sundays. I got to get rid of this OCD, this detailed, centric person that notices everything and has expectations and ideas about how I want this to go and that to go and who's where and who's what. And if I'm not careful, it will keep me distracted internally from hearing and sensing the presence of the Lord. I almost challenge you to go home and find a place. I'm a front porch guy, but I've also found that sitting on the front porch, I'm often distracted by just the natural things that are going on in creation. So the last couple of weeks, I've gone into my closet. My closet's not very big. Matter of fact, I lay in my closet floor and I have to kick my knees up on the shelf. I'm serious. But it's the darkest, quietest place in my house. See, you can't run from God there. Are y'all hearing me? You can't run from God in silence. And I think I just would really challenge you that you somehow, at some point this week, you go into a very dark and silent place and don't say nothing. Just sit there. Just sit there and learn how to begin to tarry long enough to sense the presence of God. Watch, the reason that those things become necessary is that we learn how to sense the presence of the Lord. Is that I think we talk a lot of times in church about hearing the voice of the Lord, and we're so caught by measuring God moving by the way that we move in the natural. So because Jason says something audibly in order for me to hear him, and it gives me indication that Jason has said something, then that's how I begin to measure God talking to me, is I'm waiting to hear something audibly. And the truth is that God is likely never going to audibly communicate to you. I've been in ministry almost 18 years and God has spoken to me out loud one time. So I have to learn to hear God. Watch this. If he's an unseen God, then he will also speak to you in unseen ways. Which means that I cannot measure God by sound. I have to measure God by presence. So I have to repent or empty myself of thinking naturally when I'm trying to approach a supernatural being. And I have to quit measuring God to move in my life, to speak to me the way that I hear my wife or my children or my friends or my church folks speak to me. But when you learn to get into a silent place and just sit until you're moved by the presence of God, then you learn to become very sensitive at how God works. Watch. Why does this become necessary? Because when God sends me out into a chaotic world where sound is happening everywhere, lights and sounds everywhere, our world's busy, always something going on, always something going off, always something making a sound, always something begging for our attention. And if I measure God in that frequency, I'll miss his voice. Y'all ain't hearing me right now. If I'm only tuned to the frequency of the natural, I'll never hear the supernatural. Well, I'm trying right now. Y'all got to catch up. So I get into a silent place. Watch. How many of you have ever gone to an audiology appointment where you've had your hearing checked? Who's been there? Do they put you in a room full of people and full of sounds? They put you in a booth where every other sound is locked out. And then they put headphones on you where you can't hear everything else even more except for that one sound they're trying to distribute. And they're trying to find out, are your ears tuned to the frequency that they're sending? And when you don't hear the sound, they realize that your hearing is out of frequency of the tone that's been produced. And the things in the natural have to borrow from the things in the spiritual. And we don't know how to be a move of God because we're not tuned to the frequency of heaven. Are we all right? And so I must recalibrate my hearing. And the only way I can recalibrate my hearing is I got to get in a silent place. I got to lock everything else out. I got to put the headphones on where I can't hear nothing until the frequencies of heaven are beginning to be produced through tones, and until I can adapt to the frequency of what God is saying. So that when you walk through life, watch, we walk by faith and not by sight. Let's not be mistaken. Sight is referring to the things that are in the physical realm, which means my hearing is also in the physical. So if I could say it like this, that sight begins to express itself in greater ways, because sight just represents a physical sense that also brings in hearing and touching and smelling. So I walk by faith, not by sound. I walk by faith, not by touch. I walk by faith, not by smell. Are you hearing me right? Watch what Jesus said. To he that has ears, let him hear. You know why he said that? Because he was finding out who was tuned to the frequency of heaven. If you can't hear heaven, you can't hear me. God, help. So we go silent. I often wonder what it would be like if we came in on a Sunday morning and we had nothing up there. See, that'd mess you up. You walk in and somebody open up service and then we just go silent. You know, I believe it would be a beautiful thing for us to be in a silent place and you can't hear anything but people begin to wail in the presence of God. Lord, help me. So to he that has ears, let him hear.